Today I'll tell you a story so tender it feels like the wind itself goes quiet to listen. Deep enough to leave a sting behind your ribs. Set under the wide, burning skies of the Old West. A place where dust carried secrets, where gun smoke mingled with evening prayers, and where hearts rarely found a place to rest. It begins with something small, just a quiet gesture. But it would soon grow into a choice no one in town could ignore. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Rhett Calloway never imagined a few careless words could scorch themselves into a man's ribs, but months later, he could still hear Harlow rain fling them at him like spit from the rim of a whiskey glass. You're too safe, too slow, not enough fire in you. That was the day something inside him split, not loud, not wild, just the way dried ground quietly cracks under a summer blaze. He didn't shout back. He didn't plead. He simply tipped his hat, left town, and never turned around. Folks often claim heartbreak makes a man foolish, but Rhett chose a different kind of foolishness, one that drove him toward the barren ends of the desert, past anywhere a man's name or failures carried weight. He headed west with nothing except a worn saddlebag, a half-broke stallion, and a need for silence strong enough to bruise bone. By the time the edge of Dustwater rose into sight, the sun hung low, painting the land in burning copper that made even the mountains look hollow. There sat a small ranch, leaning barn, sagging fence line, porch groaning like it remembered better years. It wasn't much, but it was far enough from old memories to breathe like a living man again. Rhett bought the place the following morning, not because he dreamed of land, not because he wanted a fresh beginning, but because the ranch looked worn the same way he felt. Two tired souls recognizing each other. The first stretch of days passed, the way desert wind moves, silent, steady, carving more than comforting. Rhett rose before daylight and worked until the stars stood guard over the plain. He patched shingles, fixed loose boards, cleared tumbleweed off the corral. Not a single chore shouted for praise. It was quiet, honest work, the kind that doesn't hurt a man to carry. Out here, no one expected storms from him. No one asked if he was enough. Most nights he sat on his porch steps, tin cup of bitter coffee warming his palms while the light faded off the ridges. And that was when the old echoes tried to slip back in, her saying he wasn't the sort of man a woman could count on, her leaving without turning her head. Whenever that ache tightened too deep, he listened instead to the wind combing through sagebrush, to the steady shifting of his horse in the corral, to the far-off cry of a lone coyote tearing open the silence. Somehow those sounds reminded him he was still a living thing, still made of skin and breath, not just a memory of someone who left. Morning always came the same, clean, sharp, unpretending. Rhett saddled up before the heat thickened, leather warming beneath his touch. He rode the fence line in an easy rhythm, checking broken rails the wind bullied overnight. Buckshot, his stallion, moved at a slow, untroubled gait, as if horse and man had agreed life didn't need hurry to matter. By noon, the land shimmered like hammered brass. By dusk, the shadows stretched long enough to wrap the barn, the house, and Rhett himself beneath a hush that felt close to holy. He told himself it was enough. Enough quiet. Enough room. He told himself he didn't miss conversation, or a voice across the table, or someone leaning close when cold crept in. He repeated those lies until the day the world shifted, soft and sudden, like rain hitting sun-baked dirt. He didn't know her name yet. Didn't know anything except her outline against a burning horizon. A young Apache woman, alone near the tree line. She didn't notice him at first, but Rhett saw enough to understand his solitude would not stay untouched. not after crossing paths with her. For the first time in months, something struck his chest. Not a wound breaking open, not regret, but a pull, as if the desert itself whispered, "Your story ain't finished, son." The morning heat was still rising when Rhett steered his wagon along the narrow trail edging the trees. Bags of grain bounced behind him, and Buckshot's ears flicked at rustle and wind. Dustwater was still miles back when he spotted movement ahead. Small, struggling, stubborn against nature. At first he thought it was a deer caught in brush, but as the wagon slowed, he saw truth. It was a girl. A young Apache woman braced beside a fallen tree, rope clenched tight in her hands. The storm from the night before had shoved the limb across the road, and she was trying, hard, fiercely, to haul it aside. The tree was heavier than she was, yet she fought it until her arms quivered. Rhett eased the wagon to a stop. She straightened at once, back rigid, jaw set, eyes sharp enough to slice distance. She couldn't have seen more than 19 or 20 summers. Her braid hung over her shoulder, threaded with small beads and a single hawk feather. Dust stained her deerskin top and skirt. There was a streak of scraped earth along her thigh where she had slipped. Still she stood without bending, without apology. He lifted his hat slightly. "Afternoon," he said, his voice low, steady. "Storm gave you a hard time, looks like." She said nothing, not even a blink, just tightened her hold on the rope. He tried again, gentle. "You want a hand with that?" Her answer snapped like dry cedar breaking. "No," but even the strongest no trembles when the weight gets too heavy. And when she leaned forward again, shoulders shaking, Rhett stepped down anyway. Not to claim space, only to help clear a road no one else would. She didn't thank him. Not then. But he wasn't the kind of man who needed words to understand how much that moment meant. For both of them. Her eyes, dark, steady, and older than her youth, held a quiet heat, the kind carried by someone who had walked through grief long before adulthood. Something in that gaze reminded Rhett Calloway of lake water at midnight. Flat on the surface, impossible to read beneath. Her braid hung loose over her shoulder, threaded with tiny beads and a single hawk feather that caught the weak daylight. Dust clung to her buckskin top and skirt, and a streak of red mud stained her thigh where she must have slipped against rough bark. Still she stood unbroken, chin lifted, shoulders squared, refusing to show weariness. Rhett tipped his hat in a slow, respectful motion. "Morning," he said, his voice low, measured. "Storm sure left you with a tougher mess than most folks got." She didn't answer. Didn't even blink. Her fingers only tightened around the rope like she meant to drag that tree by will alone. "You want a hand with that?" he tried again. "No." The words snapped through the stillness like a dry stick breaking. Firm. Final. Defensive. Rhett nodded once. "Suit yourself. Just figured I'd offer." Men from his world rarely stepped near Apache ground, not without something heavy hanging between them. And the way she watched him, guarded, sharp as flint, told him she had met too many men who'd proven unworthy of her trust. He shifted in the saddle, ready to steer around. But then she heaved again, arms quivering, breath catching, knees buckling ever so slightly beneath stubbornness. Pride was dragging her farther than strength could carry. Something in that sight pushed air from his chest. "I reckon no means not till I collapse," Rhett murmured gently. For the first time, her expression flickered. Not warmth, not irritation, just hesitation. He stepped down slowly, hands empty, voice calm. "I ain't here to bother you. Just need the road clear so I can move on. Won't take long." She looked at him like a hawk weighing a rattlesnake, judging every step, every breath. After a stretched moment, her grip loosened. Her gaze lowered. Barely audible, she exhaled. Fine. Not permission, but something close. Rhett stepped forward and took the rope from her hands. The raw red marks across her palms told him more than her silence ever could. She had been fighting this alone for far too long. Buckshot snorted behind him, sensing the strain. When Rhett knotted the rope to the saddle horn, he could feel her eyes burning into him. Uncertain, guarded, expecting harm even where none existed. Apache women seldom let outsiders get that close. He honored that with quiet patience. Then Buckshot leaned forward, muscles pulling tight, and dragged the tree from the road with one heavy sweep. A breath escaped her. Bare, shaken. Half disbelief. Half relief. Dust spun around her feet as she stepped back, watching the path clear. Rhett brushed dirt from his gloves. "That ought to do it," he said. She held his gaze, really held it, for the first time. And in that long, silent look, something unspoken shifted. Two separate worlds acknowledged each other, not merging, not trusting, just recognizing. A small nod, barely a movement, but it weighed more than any spoken thanks. In that sliver of quiet, the wide distance between an Apache woman and a lonely rancher softened. Not vanished, not forgiven, but softened just enough for something small to begin. Rhett didn't expect her again. He figured she would vanish back into the red bluffs, leaving silence to fold over his land the way it always had. Predictable, empty. But 3 days later, right as the sun sank behind the mesas, Buckshot snorted low and curious. Rhett stepped out of the barn, wiping sweat from his brow, and froze. Avella was standing by the fence. The wind carried the warm scent of baked corn from the bundle she cradled like something that mattered. In the fading light, she seemed smaller, swallowed by the broad plains, yet her posture remained sure, shoulders firm, chin raised, unwilling to bend beneath anyone's shadow. No smile, but her eyes softened. "I brought this," she said quietly, "for helping me." Rhett blinked, surprised by the offering. Apache folk rarely brought gifts to men like him, especially not to a rancher alone on the edge of nowhere. "Well," he said, stepping closer, almost careful. "That's mighty kind. Thank you." She placed the warm corn cake into his hands, wrapped neatly in soft buckskin. Her fingertips brushed his glove, just barely. Yet that brief touch sent a strange heat up his arm, so sharp he nearly lost hold of the bundle. The air between them changed, gentle, watchful, strangely alive. "Come sit," Rhett Calloway said before he could think better of it, motioning towards the empty patch of ground near the corral. Avella hesitated, uncertainty flickering across her face like a flame caught in wind. But after one steady breath, she followed him. They sat without words at first, an easy kind of silence, awkward but not unwelcome. The sky faded into deep violet, cicadas humming from dry grass, and Buckshot grazed slow circles nearby. Finally, Avella spoke. "That mountain," she murmured, pointing toward a jagged ridge lit crimson by the dying sun, "is where I was raised." Rhett followed her gaze. The peak looked ancient, stern and quiet, like it held secrets she wasn't ready to loosen. "My people called it Sleeping Hawk," she continued. "Chayton always said its shadow watched over us." "What changed?" Rhett asked, voice lowered so the dusk wouldn't steal it. Her shoulders shifted. Not breaking, just remembering. Some left, some were taken, others scattered to distant tribes. The songs, the fires, the dances, they're only echoes now. Her voice didn't crack, but sadness wrapped around each word, like something inherited rather than felt. Rhett knew there was nothing he could say to mend that kind of loss. So he didn't try. He simply listened. Avela told him how Suri dawn stitched beadwork finer than rain, how whole camps once danced beneath open sky, how Greyfeather used to spin stories shaped from stars. Rhett found himself opening up too. Not much, just enough. About Dustwater, his lonely ranch, and how quiet a house feels when it holds one plate at supper. The corn cake sat between them, half-eaten, as the land folded into darkness. The next afternoon she came back, not carrying food this time, but carrying curiosity. Rhett was working behind the barn, hammering a horseshoe into shape, when she appeared at the doorway. Sparks snapped off the iron, lighting her eyes with startled wonder. "You make those?" she asked. "Every horse around here needs them," he answered, holding the iron up. "Want to give it a try?" Her surprise was almost childlike, her hesitance tangled with interest. He placed the small hammer into her hand. Her grip tightened, stubborn and sure. "Right along this curve," he instructed. "Soft tap so it don't fight you." She swung too hard, and the metal rang sharp. Rhett laughed through his nose. "That's a start," he teased. She shot him a half-glare, half-challenge. The next strike was steadier, then smoother. Soon her rhythm matched the iron. When the shoe cooled, Rhett handed it to her. Pride flickered across her expression. Brief, like sunlight flashing off river water. "My turn," she said suddenly. "For what?" "To teach." She stepped toward a cottonwood tree and motioned him over. He followed. "Say this," she instructed, speaking a soft Apache phrase. Rhett repeated it and mangled every consonant. Her lips twitched. "Not like that." He tried again, worse. She laughed then, a quick sound, startled that it escaped. Something tilted inside him. She taught him 3 words before the light was gone. He forgot 2 by morning, but her voice remained, warm yet fierce, guarded yet inviting. They stood beneath a sky settling into indigo, 2 people from worlds that weren't meant to cross. Yet neither stepped back. Neither pretended nothing was shifting. The quiet ranch stopped feeling so empty. Dustwater was a town where whispers outran horses. A murmur dropped in the saloon. At sunset returned as gospel by sunrise. So it didn't take long, barely a week, for folks to notice that an Apache woman kept showing up near Rhett Calloway's ranch. Some swore they saw her silhouette along the fence line. Others claimed they heard her singing in a tongue not meant for white men's ears. Rumor didn't need truth. Rumor just needed hunger. "That rancher's lost his mind," someone muttered behind whiskey glass. "He's keeping company with one of them," another spat. Men leaned against porch rails, jaw working tobacco, eyes carrying judgment. Women whispered behind baskets, their glances sharp and sideways, like saying her name would bring trouble to their doorstep. Widow Tilda even prayed for her during Sunday prayer, somewhere between drought and wandering husbands. Dustwater wasn't cruel by nature. But fear has a way of sounding righteous. And now they feared Rhett, too, a rancher choosing to stand beside an Apache woman. Their world was too small to hold that kind of defiance. The trouble began soft, like wind peeling shingles from a roof. Old May Alder folded laundry and muttered, "Seen that Apache girl again by Calloway's fence." By noon, the blacksmith swore she hexed his horses. By evening, whiskey turned speculation into scripture. Rhett must be desperate. Foolish, too. Rhett heard fragments, never spoken directly, but loud enough to feel. But the real sting found Avila. One hot afternoon, she rode into Dustwater alone. She needed only a small pouch of salt. Nothing more. Something to season meat, something her people always carried. She stepped into old Gus's general store, chin high, spine straight. The room chilled. A woman gathered her children close. 2 ranch hands stiffened like her presence was plague. And behind the counter, old Gus stared, not greeting, not moving, just holding his breath like she'd walked in carrying thunder. Old Gus, usually talkative as a jaybird, stood still behind the counter, staring at Avela as though she were smoke slipping through the cracks of a boarded-up door. She set a small pouch of coins in front of him. "Salt," she said quietly. Old Gus didn't reach for it, didn't look at the shelves, didn't even blink. "Not selling today," he muttered. Her brows drew together. "But your sign says—" "I said we're not selling." His voice hardened, brittle with fear disguised as authority. Avela's fingers tightened around her satchel strap. For a moment, the memory of Rhett Calloway's porch, quiet evenings, warmth, belonging, felt impossibly far away. Here she wasn't the woman who laughed at his broken Apache words. She wasn't the girl who shaped iron into horseshoes. She wasn't the person who offered gifts out of gratitude. Here she was nothing more than Apache. And that word alone built a wall higher than truth. She turned away, refusing to let tears stain her pride. But the cruelty wasn't finished. Outside the store, Sheriff Boone Vickers stepped directly into her path. His smile was tight, polite on the surface, cold underneath. "Heard there's been some stirring," he drawled. "Hope you're not looking to bring trouble into this town." Avela stared at him, disbelief carved deep across her face. "I came for salt," she said. "That is all." "Just keep to your side of things," he warned. "Folks around here spook easy." As she walked past him, he flinched, as if even her shadow might stain him. Rhett found her halfway down the road out of town. She walked fast, breath sharp, shame flickering in her eyes though she fought to hide it. He pulled his wagon beside her. "What happened?" "Nothing," she said. But her voice was brittle, too thin to hold truth. He stepped down and stood in front of her, refusing to let her walk through that hurt alone. "Avela," he said softly, "tell me." She looked away, jaw trembling before she forced it still. "They looked at me like I wasn't human," she whispered. "And because you stand beside me, they look at you the same." The words landed deeper than she meant, not as an accusation, but as a truth she hated. Rhett didn't flinch, didn't move back. He reached for her hands, not to pull her close, not to claim anything, but simply to steady her. "I don't give a damn what they think," he murmured. For a moment, it felt like even the wind stilled. Avela blinked, tears catching the sun before she brushed them away. "This world wasn't made for people like me," she whispered. "Then we'll make space for ourselves," he replied. A promise spoken softly, but with the weight of a man who meant every syllable. The days that followed Dustwater's cold judgment grew quieter, gentler somehow. It felt as though the land itself held its breath. Rhett didn't hover, but something in him settled every time Avela rode toward his ranch, like a heartbeat finding its rightful rhythm again. One late afternoon, while the sun poured molten gold across the dry plains, they worked side by side near the paddock. The air tasted of hay and warmed dust. Buckshot grazed lazily while Avela tested the saddle straps Rhett had repaired. There was nothing grand about the moment, no threat lurking, no voices watching, just evening settling soft around them. But that simplicity was the very thing that made it dangerous. Avela wiped dust from her cheek, leaving a faint streak. She glanced at Rhett, studying him with something unreadable, soft, unsure, almost longing. "If I were part of your world," she asked, voice fragile beneath the quiet, "would you see me differently?" It should have been a light question. It wasn't. Rhett looked at her, truly looked, the beads woven into her braid catching fading light, the strength and weariness living together in her eyes, the way she stood tall even after Dustwater tried to break her dignity. "I already do," he said. Her breath caught, too honest to hide. The ground between them shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, irreversible. She turned away first, not because she rejected him, but because her face carried too much truth at once. Her fingers brushed the saddle horn, trembling like a deer unsure if stepping forward meant safety or danger. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "But I do anyway," Rhett answered, quiet as dusk. The wind shifted, carrying juniper, dust, and something sweeter. Possibility. The sky burned darker, bruised orange fading into deep rose. In that stillness, something settled, like a stone finally finding its rightful weight. Whatever this was, whatever they were becoming, there was no going back now. Avila attempted a small smile, but it trembled. "You're foolish, Rhett Calloway." "Maybe," he said, "or maybe I'm finally seeing clear." She rolled her eyes, but warmth betrayed her. He offered a hand to help her mount. She hesitated only a heartbeat before placing her foot in the stirrup. His hand rested at her waist. Not bold, not claiming, just steady. Gentle. The kind of touch that asks instead of takes. Avila's breath stilled again, and Rhett Calloway knew, without scriptures, without promises, that something in that touch had anchored itself permanently. But just beyond the cottonwoods, danger crouched with a hungry grin. A hired drifter, one of those men who sold their trigger finger wherever coin jingled loud enough, had stopped at the creek to water his bay. He wasn't hunting trouble, not yet. But trouble was the only thing he ever recognized as profit. And what he saw made his eyes brighten like lantern flame catching whiskey fumes. Rhett's hand steady on Avila's waist, her leaning slightly toward him. Sunset laying gold over both of them like blessing. "Well now," he muttered, smirking, "Dustwater's gonna eat this up." By the time Avila rode off, braids swinging, dust rising behind her, and Rhett lingered watching her disappear like a prayer whispered into the wind, that drifter was already turning his horse toward town. Every hoofbeat sharpened the story. Every mile stretched it into something louder. By nightfall, he would be at the saloon pouring poison into thirsty ears. "Calloway's keeping company with that Apache girl," he'd say. "Didn't even hide it. Hand on her like a husband." Whiskey would set the rumor ablaze. Fear would twist it uglier. Dustwater would not let it rest. Meanwhile, Rhett and Avila knew nothing except the moment where truth slid into daylight, where both stopped pretending, where falling stopped being accidental and became something holy and dangerous. Dustwater never needed proof. It only needed someone willing to spit the story. By sunrise, that hunter's tale had ripened into full scandal. His version changed with every telling. He lifted her onto that horse like she belonged to him. They were whisperin' real close. You know what that means? Laughter followed like flies on a carcass. Mean laughter. Sharp laughter. Men slapped their knees, amused at another man's reckoning. Women whispered behind half-closed fans, voices thick with disgust disguised as pity. That Apache girl's got her claws in him. Poor Rhett, lost every decent sense. She ain't fit to walk the same street as respectable folk. By noon, the gossip was no longer talk. It had curdled into something venomous. Someone carved a slur into the trough behind the livery. Someone else spit into the dirt when her name was spoken. 3 ranch hands, led by Pike Moran, laughed that Rhett must be blind if he couldn't find a white woman and had to go chasing wild blood. Ignorance sharpened itself into blades. And Avela walked right into it. She rode into Dustwater for nothing more than cloth and medicinal herbs. But the moment her boots touched ground, everything shifted. Silence swelled. Heads turned. Eyes narrowed. A boy, Jeb, picked up a pebble and flicked it toward her boots, laughing as it struck the dirt. A woman dragged her children aside as though Avela was sickness walking upright. 2 men outside the saloon, Jed and Tucker, tipped their hats mockingly. "Better watch her," one called. "Look too long and she'll hex your cattle." Words, slung like stones, cut deeper than knives. Avela kept her spine straight, her walk steady. But she was burning inside. This wasn't the first time she'd met hatred, but it was the first time that hatred reached beyond her and tried to stain a man who had chosen to stand beside her. She could not bear that. A bitter desert wind swept over the ground by sundown, dust lifting like ghosts, clouds rolling heavy behind her. Avela rode hard, storm building at her back like a bruise. When she reached Rhett's ranch, the sky cracked open and thin, cold rain struck her skin like needles. She slid off her horse before it even stopped, boots hitting mud. Her fists slammed against his door, quick, frantic. He opened immediately, and everything inside him tightened. Her hair clung in wet strands. Her clothes streaked with grit and rain, her eyes swollen, not angry, just hurt. Raw hurt. "Avela," he breathed, stepping forward. "What happened? Tell me." She shook her head, tears mixing with rain. "Your world," she whispered. "Your world will not have me." Rhett froze. She forced herself to meet his eyes, the truth spilling, trembling. "I heard what they say about me. About you, Rhett. I shouldn't stay. I bring trouble. I bring shame." "Don't," he snapped. But his voice wasn't cruel. "Don't say that." She stepped back, like the doorway was fire. "I should leave before they turn on you." Lightning rolled behind her, thunder breaking against the hills. Her hands wrapped around her arms, not from cold, but to keep something inside from tearing apart. "I don't belong in your world," she whispered. The wind howled across the plains. Rain hammered the ground, and Rhett Calloway, standing in his doorway, breath shaking, realized fully, choosing her meant stepping into a storm that would not spare him, and he still wouldn't trade it. "And if I stay, you'll pay for it," Avela whispered, voice splintering. "Because standing beside someone like me always costs something." Rhett Calloway closed the distance and caught her wrist. Not harsh, not demanding, but grounding her like a stake driven deep into earth. "You listen," he said, voice strained with months of unspoken truth. "Whatever hell they're stirring, none of that belongs to you." She shook her head, tears falling with no strength left to hide them. "I don't want to be the reason you lose your place here. I don't want to ruin the life you built." "You're not ruining anything," he breathed. "You're the only thing that has made this place feel like more than empty air." Lightning split the sky behind her, white fire carving her silhouette into sight long enough for Rhett to see everything. Her fear, her loyalty, her belief that leaving him was some kind of mercy. But he saw more. He saw the woman who had stood against insult her whole life, the woman who carried stories and loss that would crush weaker souls, the woman who walked into his quiet existence and set color where there had been nothing but dust. The West could spit venom all day. He wouldn't let its poison steal her. "Avela," he murmured, gently pulling her inside before rain swallowed her shape. "You don't walk away from me, not tonight, not ever, unless that choice belongs to you." For the first time since the rumors began, she let herself lean into him. shaking, hurting, but not alone. The storm didn't wait for permission. Wind tore across the plains like a scream, slamming dust against walls, rattling shutters as if angry spirits prowled the dark. Inside Rhett's cabin, the lantern flickered weakly against the drafts, shadows stretching long across the boards. Avila stood in the center of the room, rain dripping from her braids, breath unsteady, heart split raw. Rhett shut the door, shutting out the storm, but not the truth. She tried to steady herself, tried to speak, but her voice cracked the moment she looked at him. "I shouldn't stay," she whispered. "Your people hate me. They will turn on you. Dustwater will never let someone like me stand beside you." Rhett didn't argue. He stepped closer, slow, steady, like approaching a hurt wild horse that might bolt. When he reached her, he placed his hands on her shoulders. They were cold beneath his touch. "Avila," he said, voice rough, "look at me." She did, and he saw fear in her eyes. Yes, but strength too. Pain. Yes, but also something refusing to die. "If they won't have you," he said quietly, "then they'll answer to me." Her lips parted, not in disbelief but shock that someone would stand in front of the storm with her instead of stepping aside. "You think I'd let you walk out into that wind alone?" Rhett asked. "Into a world that spits on your name? Not while I'm breathing?" "You don't understand," she whispered, breaking again. "People like me, we're not made to belong in your towns, your laws, your life. They'll make you an outcast because of me." "Then let them," he said. "Better an outcast with you than a respected man without you." The words hit like thunder, quiet but irreversible. She turned away, moving toward the door as if checking whether the storm outside could swallow her pain. But Rhett reached out and caught her wrist again, gentle but unshakable. "You don't walk away from me," he murmured. "Not now." Lightning flashed, illuminating the porch, the barn, the endless land beyond. For one suspended moment, all of creation held still. Rhett guided her, not outside, just beneath the porch roof. Rain slanted sideways, soaking them both, but neither stepped back. They stood shoulder to shoulder, daring the storm to do its worst. Avila wrapped her arms around herself, fighting a trembling that came more from vulnerability than wind. Rhett laid his coat over her shoulders. She didn't resist. She leaned into him, their arms brushed, their breath mingled with cold rain. "I'm scared," she whispered, admitting that truth for the first time in her life. "So am I," Rhett replied, "but I'm more afraid of losing you." Her breath hitched, his lungs loosened, rain hammered the roof, wild, loud, relentless, but something quiet formed between them. Steady, certain, real. When Avila finally lifted her face, Rhett saw it. The plea for belonging, the aching hurt, and the courage rising through both. He cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away a drop of water, maybe rain, maybe a tear. "I'm right here," he whispered, and then slowly, without rush, without fear trying to rip the moment apart, they leaned into each other. Their mouths met beneath the trembling porch lantern, not in hunger or urgency, but in something deeply earned. It wasn't fierce. It wasn't reckless. It was a slow, steady vow, pressed between two people who had bled long enough from loneliness. A kiss weighted with ache, with stubborn hope, with the bravery required to choose someone others believed unworthy. When their lips parted, Avila dropped her forehead against Rhett Calloway's chest, breath shuddering like the ground had shifted beneath her boots. "We'll face them together," he murmured against her hair. "Whatever comes." She looked up, eyes shimmering not with gratitude, but with something stronger, a quiet belief returning from ashes. The storm beat against them, the sky growling, rain slashing sideways. But for once, neither ran. They stood in it, chose through it, and it marked the moment when hiding ended. Dawn crept slow, like even sunlight was unsure if it wanted part in what Rhett and Avela planned. The air smelled washed clean, wet dust and sage tangled beneath a cooling breeze. Dustwater seemed gentle in morning light, but they both knew better. Rhett saddled Buckshot, while Avela tightened the cinch on her mare. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Everything that mattered had already been spoken beneath stormlight. When Rhett offered his hand to help her mount, it wasn't in shadow. It wasn't cautious. It was deliberate, unapologetic. They rode side by side down the road, two silhouettes cut against the gold edge of sunrise. For the first time, Rhett didn't shield her from the world. And for the first time, Avela didn't shrink herself small enough to go unnoticed. By the time they reached Dustwater's heart, people were already watching. A woman carrying laundry paused mid-step. A ranch hand staggered over his own boots. The men outside the saloon lowered their glasses without swallowing. The hooves hitting the dirt sounded louder than gunfire. Not two riders arriving, but a declaration. A choice. As they passed the trading post, someone muttered, "Well, I'll be damned. He brought her out front." At the barbershop porch, someone else whispered, "He ain't scared of any of us." Rhett didn't look left or right. His chin stayed forward. Avela kept her gaze steady. The dust beneath their horses almost seemed to spark. He dismounted outside the diner and helped her down with a hand that didn't tremble. Not once. They walked through the door together. Conversations died mid-sentence. Chairs stilled. Forks hovered in air. Avela froze near the entrance, caught between staying and retreating. Rhett placed a gentle palm against her back. "Come on," he whispered. "Let's eat." He drew a chair for her at a table near the window. That single gesture landed with the force of a sledgehammer, so ordinary elsewhere, so revolutionary here. For a moment, no one moved. Then Elsie May, the diner owner, apron stitched with years of labor, stepped forward. She didn't flinch. She didn't hide her face. She looked Avela directly in the eye. "You two look like you've been through a storm," she said, setting down biscuits. She returned with another plate, warm cornbread, butter melting slow. "No charge for that one. Folks who walk through storms deserve something sweet." Avela blinked, startled. Rhett tipped his hat, quietly grateful. And that was when something in Avela's posture softened. Not fully, but enough to breathe. A few minutes later, Doc Mercer shuffled over, coffee mug in hand, boots dragging with age and stories he never told unless asked. He studied Avela, not with suspicion, but with knowing. "You've got eyes that don't back down," he said. "World could use more of that." Not praise, not pity, recognition. At a corner booth, Jed and Tucker whispered to each other, "That Calloway's not backing away from her." "Reckon that deserves respect." Respect, a word never tied to her before. Some still glared, some still lowered their eyes. Sheriff Boone Vickers slowed as he passed outside, jaw tightening through the window. Others quietly left, pretending they suddenly remembered chores waiting at home. But the venom didn't rule the room anymore. Small kindnesses challenged it. A warm plate offered freely. A doctor's honest acknowledgement. Two young cowboys reconsidering what they thought was truth. And a man, Rhett Calloway, standing beside her with unshakable stillness. Prejudice did not crumble, but it loosened. Just enough for her to breathe without feeling hunted. When breakfast was nearly done, Avela whispered, barely audible, "I thought your world would push me out. Rhett brushed his fingers across hers. Not boldly, just enough to steady her. "Some tried," he said, "but they don't get to decide anything for us." A trembling smile touched her lips, and for the first time in many days, she looked forward, not back. Dustwater hadn't changed, not entirely, but hearts had shifted, as they often do, quietly, humbly, not by force, but by watching two people choose each other openly, bravely in daylight. Summer heat rippled across the plains, autumn winds rattled through brittle brush, winter frost turned the earth silver and sharp, and through each shift in season, Avila remained. Not as a passerby, not as a temporary shelter against loneliness, but as part of the land itself, rooted, steady, present, the way cottonwoods hold their ground along red canyon walls. She moved into the ranch near the end of spring. No ceremony, no announcing it to the world. One twilight, she simply said, "This place feels lighter than anywhere I've been." And Rhett Calloway, who had waited for her to choose in her own time, answered, "Then stay. Stay for as long as your heart settles here." Behind the cabin, she raised a dwelling the way her people always had. Rounded walls of earth, beams shaped by hand, warm and low to the ground. Rhett never altered it, not a nail, not a wall post, unless she asked. It was hers, a piece of her world standing on his land, proof she didn't need to trade heritage for a roof. In return, Rhett expanded the corral, fencing off a wider stretch where wild mustangs drifted down from the mesas. Avila worked them with a patience that humbled him. She matched their breathing, whispered calm into their panic, and earned their trust one heartbeat at a time. Rhett had always believed horses bowed only to command, but she taught them to settle through gentleness. Their days fell into rhythm crafted by sun and dust. At dawn, they watered the horses together, breath fogging in the cold. At noon, they tended the corn rows behind the barn, hers straighter than his, though she never teased him for it. By evening, they hunted rabbits or forged small tools by lantern light, or walked the ridge in silence. Silence between people who trust each other can feel like shelter. Sometimes coyotes sang far out on the flats. Avila would tilt her head, eyes half closed, listening like those voices carried ancestral memories. "That sound," she once told him, "means the world is still alive, even when people forget how to be." Rhett didn't always grasp her meanings, but he understood her, and that was enough. Then came the afternoon that shifted something deeper. A storm had rolled through at midday, leaving the ground dark and shining. The clouds tore open to a gold sky when Avila stepped onto the porch carrying a woven string of Apache beads. Blue, white, red, patterned the way Surrey dawn once taught her. She tied them above the doorway. Rhett watched quietly. "What does it mean?" he asked. She smoothed the beads with her thumb and whispered, "It means this place belongs to me, and I belong to it." Her voice carried gently, but the words settled into Rhett like weight carved into stone. No minister could have blessed the land more deeply. Life didn't suddenly grow easy. Some townsfolk still narrowed their eyes. A few still muttered that Rhett had lost his mind chasing after that Apache girl. But rumors lost sharpness. Sharpness dulled into resignation, and resignation softened into something that resembled acceptance. They never married. Not on paper. No rings. No vows spoken beneath cottonwoods. And yet, each morning when Avila, hair tangled from wind, brushed her fingers along his jaw before tending the horses, Rhett felt something stronger than any vow spoken aloud. Each evening, when her muscles trembled from gentling mustangs and he wordlessly handed her a cup of warm coffee, she felt it too. Their love wasn't loud. It wasn't gilded or sanctified. It lived in shared chores, shared blistered hands, shared fireside quiet. Two people choosing each other, without needing applause, without needing permission. What they built wasn't fancy. It was older than ceremony. A ranch turned into a home. A lonely man turned into a partner. A wandering woman turned into belonging. And every sunrise, the decision repeated itself. Not spoken, not argued, just lived. By the time another year rolled over Dustwater, the town learned something it never expected. The world didn't fall apart simply because Rhett Calloway loved an Apache woman. At first, folks watched them like people watching lightning form. Tight shoulders, waiting for burning ruin. But ruin never came. They didn't fight for approval. They didn't ask for space. They didn't try to make converts. They simply lived, quietly, steadily, side by side. And slowly, like stubborn grass pushing through hard soil, the edges of hostility dulled. It began with the simplest thing. Rhett and Avela riding into Dustwater on the same horse, his arm looped around her waist, her leaning for balance, not hiding, not apologizing, just living. The street always fell silent when that sight passed. Dustwater had never known what to do with quiet love that refused to bow. Mothers paused on their porches. Ranch hands froze mid-stride. A few men ducked their faces into hat brims and muttered beneath their breath. But not a one of them dared say anything outright. Not when Rhett Calloway rode through town looking steady as sunrise, unshaken by their stares. Weeks slid by, then months, and slowly, Dustwater stopped flinching. Some folks lifted a hand when the pair passed on horseback. Children waved. A couple merchants nodded as if nothing was strange at all. The sharp words dried up. The gossip ran out of breath. As for Voss Candler, the drifter who lit the first flame of rumor, he eventually drifted away when no one cared to buy his poison anymore. Dustwater hadn't suddenly become gentle, but it had gone quiet. And quiet, sometimes, is the only victory a heart really needs. Rhett and Avela found peace inside that quiet, not peace handed to them, peace carved and earned through stubbornness, loyalty, and choosing each other again and again no matter who watched. The ranch thrived. Corn grew high enough to brush the lower rail fence. The mustangs Avila gentled ran wild and glossy over the ridges. Wind that once carried accusation now carried nothing more than dust and distant coyote song. Life didn't roar. It didn't blaze. But it filled in every quiet space. One late afternoon, when the sky burned copper and ember along the mesa edges, Rhett and Avela sat on the porch bench watching the sun settle behind red stone cliffs. The breeze tugged at Avela's braids, making the beads knock gently together, like tiny chimes made of memory. Rhett rested his arm along the back of the bench, fingertips brushing her shoulder. "Funny thing," he murmured, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Folks talk about peace like it's land or blood or something you've got to fight someone for." Avela turned her head, listening. "But peace," Rhett continued, voice low and steady as cattle crossing shallow water. "Peace is just who sits beside you when the sun goes down." The words drifted into warm evening air, settling between them like something vowed but never spoken. Avela leaned in, resting her head against his chest. She heard his heartbeat, slow, measured, unafraid. "Then I've found my place," she whispered. Rhett closed his eyes. A man once convinced he wasn't enough, not fierce enough, not loud enough, had somehow become the steady ground someone else could stand on. And she, a woman turned away from every doorway she tried to enter, had found room to breathe without losing a single piece of herself. The sun dropped fully, leaving everything stained with a soft gold, the kind of gold that lingers in memory long after it fades from sight. Avela slipped her fingers into his. Rhett closed his hand around hers. No more speaking. No need. They weren't hiding. They weren't standing alone. And the West, wide, rough around the edges, unforgiving at times, finally bent enough to give them a place at its table. For years after, anyone riding past the old Callaway Ranch at sundown would see them. Two silhouettes on the porch. A weathered cowboy, calm at last. An Apache woman with unbreakable spirit. Two worlds that once refused to meet, now resting side by side in the dying light. And that was how their story settled. Quiet, enduring, glowing like the last gold streak of a western sunset. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening, and for allowing this story to speak to your heart. The Wild West still holds countless truths, some painful, some tender, all worth remembering. Stay with us, subscribe, comment, and invite others to discover these untamed stories, from our hearts to yours. Thank you for being part of this journey. Aviso legal. Disclaimer: each story shared here is produced for storytelling enjoyment. Certain scenes may include fictional or dramatized elements inspired by historical circumstances. Although AI tools assist us in visuals, narration, and script development, the emotional tone, editing, and quality control are conducted by people to ensure meaningful experiences. We fully uphold YouTube's policies, using no deceptive recreations or impersonations of real individuals. All creative resources are properly licensed. Unauthorized copying, re-uploading, or remixing is not permitted. Thank you for supporting the effort behind every episode we create.